Hi, I'm Zach Childs, and this is the Truetone Lounge. Today, our guest is Reggie Young. Reggie Young is one of the most revered and respected, guitar players of all time. He's played on sessions for everyone from Elvis to Merle Haggard and George Strait, and on and on and on. So, you were born in 1936.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Missouri?
In Crothersville, Missouri. Yeah.
Okay.
In the Boot Hill, they call it.
In the Boot Hills.
Yeah.
And so how did you end up from Missouri, and then you were in Arkansas next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was in Arkansas, and my mother's mother lived in Missouri, and she went up there to have me. And
Were you born in a hospital or in a home?
no, in home, in my
Yes.
grandmother's house.
Yes.
And so after I got able, I guess we moved back to Osceola, Arkansas.
And so you lived there for about the first 10 or so years of your life?
13 years. I moved to Memphis when I was 14.
Okay. And when did you start playing the guitar?
When I moved to Memphis, my dad played guitar, the old Hawaiian style guitar, Sweet Lalani and all those songs.
Yes.
And he bought me a guitar for Christmas. And it was a National flat top. The strings were way up, but I got through it.
Yeah. You learned how to, you got strong.
I got very strong.
Yeah.
And then I bought a Dillman pickup. I know. And it did, at a pawn shop, I bought it.
Yeah.
And then my neighbor made me an amp out of a jukebox parts. So then I was electrified and I couldn't be stopped.
Yeah. Yeah. So who were some of your earliest, guitar heroes, guys that you were listening to and trying to emulate? Or were you just kind of playing melodies? Or
Well, yeah, I was. I guess Django Reinhardt.
Yeah.
And early, well, in Memphis, like B.B. King and some blues, Delta blues players. But then Chet Atkins was a big influence on everybody around there at that time.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about Memphis and the players there is it seems like that's really a point of intersection between, Nashville and Delta blues. It seems like most of the players, like when I was thinking about your playing, I thought that your playing is kind of, if there could be an intersection between Chet Atkins and B.B. King, Reggie Young might be near
there
that.
somewhere.
Yeah, in there somewhere. Yeah.
But I was influenced by Memphis music. Is what it is. It's a little different than most places. The clubs up and down Beale Street and around. The music still sounds. There was always blues or something, Yeah. But it was R&B based.
Yeah.
But not a lot of country bands were there.
Okay. But they were still somewhat influenced by country
Absolutely,
music. But
yeah.
but that didn't really come out. It was a mixture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So who was the first artist that you played with professionally?
Well, there was a guy in Memphis. His name Eddie Bond, and we had a rockabilly band. We formed a band together, and it was called Eddie Bond and
The Stompers.
The Stompers, yeah. And we got this record called Rockin' Daddy, and it was a regional hit.
Okay.
But we got on this package tour with Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, and some more rockabilly artists.
Yeah.
And we toured all over the United States.
Yeah.
And that was my first time out. Yeah.
And you would later, record with those and tour with some of those other characters. So. So you had Eddie Bond, then also Johnny Horton comes into the picture.
Johnny Horton came into the picture, and after a while, he needed a guitar player.
Okay.
And asked me if I would would come to work with him, and well, Marshall Grant, the bass player with Johnny Cash, he's the one that approached me. He said, Horton needs a guitar player. I'm gonna put your name in the pot.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got elected, and so that's cool. I went to Shreveport and played on the Louisiana Hayride for back in the '50s for years.
Yeah.
And
yeah, back in that day, the Louisiana, there were regional radio shows that were very important at the time. The Grand Ole Opry was just one of many, regional live radio shows in Shreveport and Dallas and Chicago, and all had big radio shows at that point.
And a lot of people, they graduate from the hayride and go to the Opry. See, and anyway, it was a good place to learn stuff.
Yeah.
And I knew a lot of people down in Shreveport that I met. There was one guy, a good friend of mine named David Houston.
Yes.
And he had some pretty big records out. And DJ Fontana that played drums with Elvis, he's from Shreveport.
Yeah. And James Burton.
And James Burton, oh yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, while I was down there, I got a call from my draft board.
Okay.
And they still had the draft then.
Yeah.
But said I would probably be on the next draft.
Okay.
So I came home. I'm trying to think of the year.
Is this before or after the Bill Black combo has started, the Army?
No, this is when it started.
Okay.
So I came back to Memphis in the late 50s.
Okay.
And I had known Bill, and Elvis was in the service, so Bill wasn't working, didn't do anything.
Okay. Yeah, how did you meet Bill Black?
We used to play in places around Memphis. There was Home for Incurable was one of them.
Home for the Incurable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Jack Cowboy Clements.
Yes.
He was. He would do something. We'd back him up. But
when he was still a performer before you kind of got more into record production.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bill said, did I want to work over at Royal Studio, High Records?
Okay.
And we were just playing with artists, and they write songs, and so we'd help put it down on tape. And then once a month, a guy named Ed Kesak from London Records would come in, and he'd listen to what all we had done, And he didn't get to pick very many. And I remember I said, well, let's try something different, because instrumentals were real big back then.
Right. You had the Ventures and
Champs
and Dwayne Eddy and all these different artists where instrumental rock was cool at that point.
So I took my guitar and tuned down 2 steps where it was real low.
Yeah, so you tuned down to C.
Yeah. There's no trick they used to use back then. The drummer would take a drum solo and he'd reach over and play over the bass player, upright bass player.
Right. He'd hit the strings with
it,
and then they'd hit the guitar strings too. Yeah.
So I don't know, it sort of came from that, and I said, I took a pencil and I was playing a don't shuffle beat.
So you're doing kind of a boogie shuffle beat, but you were instead of hitting it with a pick, you were hitting it with the pencil.
Yeah.
There's
so we did blues stuff like that, and Ed Kesak, when he came, the next time he came down, he heard that, he said, "Oh, what is that?" I said, "I like that."
Yeah.
And we said, well, we were just goofing off a little bit, but he took it and released it on High Records, distributed by London. And Smokey, Part 1 and Part 2, they had Part 1 and Part 2 records back then.
Okay.
And it became a pretty big hit. We were the #1 instrumental group for 1960, 61, and 62, according to Billboard.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Ed from London Records was coming down, and he was looking through what High Records was doing, and he was kind of cherry picking what he liked that he would re-release on London Records, which was being released all over the world, or mainly in Europe, or
all over, I think.
Okay, yeah. So he was just that was pretty common. That was Jerry Wexler was doing that with with other little labels and things like
right,
that.
yeah.
So working with Bill Black, did you hear many Elvis stories?
Oh yeah. There was one thing that was unusual for me. Black said that when he was working with Elvis, it was a #1 act in the United States, and I thought they made a lot of money, but they made union scale wherever they played.
Okay.
And like if it was $15 to play Memphis or St. Louis or something, that's all they made. They get paid scale for whatever town they went to, and
wow.
so I think they quit.
Yeah.
Bill and Scotty, and I think DJ stayed with him. But anyway.
So so Elvis was raking it in, and Colonel Tom Parker was just paying the players just the bare minimum what he could get by with.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. So you're working with Bill. So then Bill Black passes away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that a complete shock to everyone?
Well, I think he had a brain tumor.
Right.
And yeah, it was a little bit, but we knew he was sick.
Okay.
Because he quit playing and staying home and.
But the Bill Black combo kept going. You continued to record, but with another bass
There was
player.
a road band that went out. I didn't. I stayed home.
Okay.
I'd quit the combo and just stay in the studio and work.
Okay. And again, this is at Royal Studios with High Records.
Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us about Willie Mitchell. Tell us about the importance of Willie Mitchell in the Memphis kind of music scene.
Well, he used to play in a club across the river over in West Memphis. Him and, I'm trying to think of the name of the club, but anyway, Al Jackson was his drummer, and he had a great band. But he became part of the high rhythm section and was backing up a lot of people, and he would produce a lot of people.
Okay.
And eventually became one of the owners
of High.
Yeah. So we sort of intermingled. Willie, I played in Willie's band, and Willie would play in our band sometimes, so we just kind of swapped back and forth.
Yeah.
And we had another guy, Ace Cannon, who was a
saxophonist.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that so this is early '60s. You're recording at High.
Yeah.
What were some of the hits you played on? I remember one was Haunted House.
Haunted House by Jumpin' Gene Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big record.
Yeah.
Big one.
What were some of the other big records that you played on?
I'd have to rack my brain.
Okay. So then we get up to then you're working at High and you're recording there, and then all of a sudden there's this offer from the Beatles, and they want the Bill Black combo to play
to be the opening act for their first tour.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of Beatlemania in the U.S.
And I didn't really know what that meant.
Okay.
But I knew I wanted. I was thinking, well, I wasn't married, and I said, I'd like to go to Europe, and here's a free way to go to Europe,
Yeah.
And so we did 30 days in the United States with the Beatles.
Right.
And then we were the union had a trade agreement. So many musicians from England could come over here, and so many could go over there on a work visa, something.
Yeah.
So we were the trade band for the Beatles, and after the tour was over here in the States, we went to Europe with Billy J. Kramer, and there was the acts on that tour was like Eric Clapton with the Yardbirds and the Nashville Teens and the Kinks and a lot of those English groups,
Yeah. So on the English, on the American part of the tour, now of course everyone's familiar with when Beatlemania began. There were the crowds were just screaming, and all of that mess, and people couldn't really hear themselves play.
No.
But what were some things that you can tell us about, the Beatles that, because we all know about the screaming that was done, but what were some things about the Beatles that you got to experience?
Well, we all traveled together, and we hung out a lot together. And we were stuck in Key West one time because of a storm. We just took over the restaurant and played music the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I became friends with George Harrison.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know the gauge strings I was using. Mm-hmm. I said, because I played a lot of blues and had bend strings, but you couldn't do it with heavy gauge strings.
Right. Because he was probably using a wound third.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And then I remember him saying that, he said, we're just now realizing that there's nowhere on the planet that we can go that we're not recognized.
And was he sad about that?
No, he just made the statement.
Okay.
So that was in '64.
Yeah. So that was at the beginning.
At the beginning, yeah. And I didn't know what. When I got on that tour, I didn't realize it was Beatlemania. Mm-hmm. And we went to the Cow Palace out in San Francisco for the first show. And I remember we left Memphis on a Greyhound bus, the band with all our stuff. Yeah. And we went out to San Francisco, and we were the opening act and backed up the other acts that were on there, like Righteous Brothers and Jackie DeShannon. And anyway, it was. But when the Beatles came on, oh man, we had to play an hour before they came out on stage, and it was just you couldn't hear nothing. It was just And
so you had mentioned that you were using an unwound third. How you couldn't just buy a set of strings with an unwound third at that point, could you?
No.
So what would you do?
I'd use a higher gauge third string that was not wrapped.
Okay.
And James Burton did the same thing.
Okay. So y'all would just move the strings over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what would you? And so you would just get another first string, or yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that you would have 3 unwound strings and 3 wound.
Right.
And then with this on this Beatle tour, there's some photos of the Dick Clark performance with you on the with Bill Black. You had a Gibson ES 345.
Exactly right.
It was sunburst with the
and a stereo amp.
Yes.
And it had the knob thing you could turn. And so I had that when I got that guitar. I had it mainlined instead of being stereo. I said I wanted just to.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't even use the volume on it.
Okay.
I just went from the pickups right to the amplifier.
Okay, so
I threw a volume pedal.
Yeah,
and
that's actually a common modification now, and because of the stereo and the baritone switch, it kind of kills the tone.
Yeah,
many people feel it kills the tones of those guitars, and so they have all that disconnected. So you can take a lot of the weight off the guitar.
Exactly right.
So and what kind of you had a 345 and we're using a volume pedal live?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what kind of amp?
And a Standell tube amp.
Okay.
And I remember at the first show we were on the plane and George Harrison came down the aisle and said, "Where's the guitar player with Bill Black?" So he found me set up somewhere. He said, "What in the world are you using?" They had these new Vox amps that were pretty loud, but that Standell was louder and cleaner than anything they had. He would say, "What are you playing through?"
Yeah.
And it was the old Standell amp.
Yeah. Most of the early Standell amps had that kind of Naugahyde covering on them, and they had a 15-inch JBL or Altec speaker in them, and they were really powerful amps.
Yes, they were. Yeah. And I bought that amp because when I was in Memphis playing clubs and stuff, it only had one input. So whenever somebody would come in a club, "I'm going to play with your amp," but there's only one input, so they couldn't set it in.
That's a nice feature to have when you don't want to play with other people. So
one other thing about
Yeah.
the Beatle tour, we had dark suits that had Bill Black combo initial, BBC.
okay.
Well, the kids thought that was moving from the BBC.
Okay.
They had to actually maybe touch Ringo or somebody. You know,
Yeah.
and they chased us all over the place on those shows.
Yeah. Kind of a quick aside, kind of Beatles story. So I have a friend of mine. They got to meet Paul McCartney recently, and he indicated to him that they were having a discussion about playing live and playing under pressure.
Yeah.
And my friend indicated that one of the most intense moments for him was playing in front of you and your wife Jenny on Broadway, and so he was telling Paul McCartney about you and Jenny sitting there in front of him, and Paul McCartney said, "I know Reggie."
Wow.
So he remembers you from I
Yeah.
guess from that tour. So
That was a good tour. They were really sincere in what they were doing,
Yeah.
And even though it was craziness,
but they were serious about performing the
oh
music. Yeah.
very much so.
So on the English part, I mean, on the European part of the tour, you've got Billy J. Kramer, and then you've got Clapton playing with the Yardbirds.
Yeah.
And you're at this point in 1964, you're in your early 20s, and Clapton's like 17
Yeah,
years old or
I think
something
so,
like that.
yeah.
So you're a bit older than Clapton, and you're a little more advanced. And you've already at some point you've already played with B.B. King. You've sat in with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the story is that you had to be off stage because they wouldn't allow you to be.
Oh
on
yeah,
stage.
back in
Yeah. Part of the
with BB, yeah.
yeah.
Because it was integrated,
Yeah.
and white guys can't be on stage with them.
Yeah. So just a quick aside. So when you got to play with B.B. King, did you ask B.B. himself or someone else in the band? Who did you ask to sit in with him?
When BB would be in town in Memphis, they played a place called the Plantation Club over in West Memphis,
Okay.
or his band did, not BB.
Okay.
And the drummer's name is Sparrow, I think.
Okay.
And I could go over there and sit in with the band, but I had to stay behind the curtain,
Okay.
and I'd plug in and play with their band because it was really funky.
Okay.
It really was.
I bet it was. So back to Europe and playing with the Yardbirds. So So how do you meet Eric Clapton? I mean, does Eric just come up to you and?
I think it was during a rehearsal, but he was a blues player and I was too.
Yeah.
And so we really hit it off, and we'd sit and jam between shows or songs and stuff,
Now,
So-
were you learning off him or was he learning off of you?
I think we were learning off of each other.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
He mentioned me in his autobiography.
yes, he did.
Yeah. And it was real nice. I got to thank him for it and things he said.
Yeah, there are not many players that get mentioned in his autobiography, and he mentions you in glowing terms. So yeah, it's very nice.
Oh, as one other thing I was thinking about the Beatles.
Okay.
When we first started, the first show that whatever town we were in, the local DJs would come out to rev the crowd up,
Yeah.
And so they would come out, the DJ would come out and say, "Well, are you ready to hear Ringo?" They go, "Yeah." And Paul McCartney, "Oh, yeah." And they're just hollering and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
"Well, here's the Bill Black combo."
Boo.
They didn't want to do that. So finally, after about 3 dates, we got them to quit doing that because they were hurling stuff on stage. And
Right. Not underwear.
no, not at all. And anyway, the end for the Beatle tour.
Okay.
But
And so with Clapton, was he playing what kind of guitar was Clapton playing? Was he playing a Telecaster or?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's been a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And but he was using an unwound third also. He had already learned about that.
Yeah.
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 Did you ever think that that Clapton was going to go on to be?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know he was a good player, but
Yeah.
I never thought he would accomplish what he did, which he did.
Yeah. Well, he probably didn't sing with the Yardbirds at all.
Yeah, no, just playing.
Yeah. Very cool. So when did you start working in Muscle Shoals?
Gosh, when I got out of the Army in the early 60s.
Okay. And so was this for Rick Hall?
Yeah.
Okay. And was this the original rhythm section with like Norbert Putnam and?
Yeah, David Briggs.
Yeah.
Keyboard, Norbert, and Jimmy Johnson played guitar. Anyway, their guitar player had passed away. So and I had known him. I'm trying to think of his name. Anyway, so I would come over from Memphis and to be their guitar player. And I met Dan Penn, who the first time I met him, he came up and he kind of kicking his feet around, shuffling, looking down the floor, and said, "I knew you were a guitar player." And I said, "How come?" He said, "Your case." I had a no beat up leather case.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You must be pretty good."
Because your case was worn.
Yeah. But he was the funkiest white man I'd ever met at the time.
Yeah. An amazing, songwriter,
I know.
and producer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started working in Muscle Shoals, and that was part of the first rhythm sections. Before, I guess, because Jimmy Johnson and the
David
other
Hood,
those other cats kind of came in a little bit later.
Yeah.
So when did you meet Chips Moman?
I was playing in a club over in West Memphis. Let me think, was this before High Records, maybe?
Okay.
And he was a guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
He played really good.
Yeah.
And he'd come in and sit in with us a lot.
Yeah.
I was playing with Eddie Bond, so that's back
Okay.
before High Records. And anyway, we became friends. And I just sort of known him off and on over the years. And
Yeah. So Chips kind of now the name Chips is a nickname. His real name is like Lincoln.
yeah,
So where did
Lincoln Wayne?
Lincoln Wayne Moman? So where did the nickname Chips come from?
I don't know. I know he had some poker chips tattooed on his arm.
That's what I had heard, was that it came from he really enjoyed gambling a lot.
He loved to gamble. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and just so we can kind of tell the story of Chips Moman real quick. He was part of the formation of Stax Records, and so he engineered and kind of produced some of the early sessions. And then there was some type of dispute between he and Jim Stewart.
Right.
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah. So then he kind of went off on his own, and so when did he start going down to Muscle Shoals and start, because as a guitar player, he played on some major albums, things that what are some of the things that Chips played on?
Land of a Thousand Dances, one of them.
Yeah, Wilson Pickett.
Yeah.
Is he playing that dun dun dun? Yeah.
And
is that him on Aretha Franklin doing Respect, doing the opening lick?
no, I think that was Joe South.
Okay.
But he played on a lot of Aretha stuff.
Okay.
But there's a lot of stuff in Muscle Shoals that he did play on. He'd go to New York and work for Jerry Wexler at Atlantic Records.
Yeah.
And I'd used to go up there with him, me and him and bass player Tommy Cogbill.
Okay.
And we'd go up there and work for a week for Wexler.
What were some of the things that you cut with Wexler in New York?
Well, Solomon Burke was one. And I swear I can't remember that.
Well, Solomon Burke, that's a good one to list. So you mentioned Tommy Cogbill. So Tommy was a bass player, but tell me how you met Tommy.
In Memphis, he's playing clubs. He's in a little jazz group, saxophone and bass and keyboard, I think.
Okay. Was he playing bass or guitar?
He's playing he played guitar a lot of times, but he was an excellent guitar player.
Yeah.
And he knew all those old jazz songs in the proper keys they were supposed to be in.
I didn't realize that Tommy was a guitar player until I saw a picture of him on the back of Aretha Gold, which is
wow.
and it shows a picture of him and he's holding a Telecaster. And then I realized that on Aretha Now, he's playing a lot of because they had moved Jerry Jamot to the bass chair, and Tommy was playing guitar on those records.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So,
yeah. He's an excellent musician.
Yeah.
And
he played all those kind of busy bass parts on the early Aretha records that were big hits.
What was there's another one, Memphis Soul Stew by
King Curtis. Yeah.
It's a busy bass line. It's great though.
Yeah, and on that track, you're playing guitar.
Yeah.
And many people, they give credit to Cornell Dupree for playing that because they've heard like a live clip of it, or there's a video of Cornell playing that, with King Curtis.
Yeah.
But the original recording, you came up with the part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you played it.
I enjoyed working with King. He was before that. When I'd play a solo, I'd usually, after we got through, I'd say, well, let me go back and fix something. He was the first player I knew that could play solos, and you didn't need to do anything.
He didn't. He would just play a solo, and he didn't fix anything. Yeah.
And I said, I wanted to be like that. So thinking, when I'd play, I'd say, I'm going to play like King Curtis.
So that was your goal, was
yeah.
Wow. He made some amazing records.
Oh, he did. He did.
And he was kind of Aretha Franklin's kind of band leader.
Yeah.
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 You mentioned Jerry Wexler already. How did you meet Jerry? Was it the first time you met him was flying up to New York?
Up to New York through Chips Moman, I guess.
Yeah.
And Tommy.
Yeah.
So the three of us would go up there, and they paid us $100 a day.
So that was you were just kind of paid a flat rate to play on the album. Was that $100 a day?
Yeah.
Oh, doesn't sound too bad. And was Tom Dowd the engineer on those?
He was.
Yeah. Who would later work on the Clapton and all sorts of other records. Yeah. Was he a good engineer?
He was an excellent engineer.
Yeah. So you're playing on these sessions, and at this point you're using maybe 4-track or how many, who knows, 4 to 8 tracks, something like this. This in the mid '60s. How important were things like mic placement and things like that?
They're very important.
Yeah.
And usually he'd come out on the floor. When he was in Memphis, I was at Moman Studio then. I had quit over at American because, I'll bring this up.
Yeah.
Used to, like, Union Scale was $60 or something for a 3-hour session. Mm-hmm. Well, if we only cut, say, 2 songs, they had to clear it through the union. Mm-hmm. They had to clear it with the $60. And but then we go get our check at the union, and we have to kick back 30 to the owner of the studio.
Oh, wow.
And so they used that. They had a safe down there, and we all knew that it was just loaded with money for payola and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But Ray Harris, one of the owners, called me one day and said, we're going to have to cut you back to $10 a side. And I said, really? And I knew then, I said, well, I'm quitting. Yeah.
And this was at Royal, or was this at
yeah.
Okay, this was at Royal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was about an hour later, the guy that owned the studio called me and apologized, said he was just trying to say how cheap we could work.
Oh, wow.
But I knew from that moment on that I was going to get out of that studio. I couldn't work that cheap.
Yeah.
And Moman wanted me to come to American.
Because he was setting up his own studio.
Yeah. So they had, instead of 3-hour sessions, we were doing 5-hour sessions. We give them an extra 2 hours. It's a Memphis thing. Mm-hmm. And we get scaled for whatever we did every 5 hours. And So that's how the band started. Moman was an engineer, and Gene Freshman was the drummer. We just kind of hired people all over. Bobby Emmons was a keyboard player. Bobby Wood was a piano player, and Tommy was a bass player.
Yeah.
And Gene Chrisman was a drummer. And boy, we got a ton of records over there for Moan.
Yeah.
And we decided to quit traveling. Me and Moan and Cogwell, and said, all right, if they want to use either one of us, they're going to have to come to the studio to do it. Well, that was good for Moan because he owned the studio, you know.
Right.
But I was tired of traveling, and so was Tommy. And the first one, I did a record with Joe Tex called Show Me was the name of it. And it was with his band and me. And I went over to Nashville to do it. And when we got through, Joe said, all right, we want to book some more time. And I said, I can't, no, I can't do that. I'm not working anywhere but at American Studio. And he said, oh, really? So he talked to the producer, and they came to Memphis, and we cut Skinny Legs and All was a big record.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first one that we'd done with under the new thing, you know.
Yeah.
We'd one for all, one, you know. And if any of them went anywhere, they'd have to take me with them, and vice versa, you know.
Right. So yeah, so Chips Moman started American, and he got together this rhythm section that you were the guitarist.
Yeah.
And it must have been really advantageous to have a rhythm section and your amps, everything's set up, everything's
The
mic'd
same
up.
place, yeah.
Yeah. And then you have the same rhythm section every single day,
Right.
and you just have different artists come
That's
in.
it.
And
I remember you asked about Tom Dowd. When he would come down with Wexler or a Reeve, I remember Tom would, as we worked the songs up, they were like head arrangements. We'd work up on the floor out there. He would come out and he would, all right, he want you to be this part of the studio to be quiet. All right, you guys keep doing that, and then he'd add till he got the rhythm section like he wanted it. And,
so he was arranging it.
he was arranging and the mic placement. And he's a very smart man, very smart.
What were some important lessons that you learned from Tom Dowd or Wexler or some of those other producers that you were working with?
Well, we could work together as a group instead of individuals, you know. And
So seeing the bigger picture instead of just thinking about the guitar.
Right.
Yeah.
And anyway, they brought in Wilson Pickett one time, and not one time, a few times.
Yeah.
We got some really good records on him, and
Bobby Womack comes
Bobby
in.
Womack came in. And I learned a lot from Bobby Womack.
Yeah.
And he was left-handed, but could take my guitar and play it without having to change the strings around. So he would we were sitting like you and I are, and he'd be watching me and I'd be watching him, and it's funny, the styles changed. I was playing those thirds and stuff, and he was playing Bobby Womack.
Yeah.
And I stole a lot of stuff from him, and he did from me too. So
That's an interesting point. The kind of the Memphis style of guitar playing.
Yeah.
Because you have yourself and Steve Cropper,
Right.
and then of course you have some other individuals that weren't necessarily Memphis guys that also kind of played in that style, like Cornell Dupree.
Yeah.
And others. Where did the style come from? Because part of it is like the fifths and the sixths that are
Right.
sliding around, and then there's the kind of flowery kind of playing that you'd also maybe hear from Curtis Mayfield and some other guys.
Yeah, he's a good player too.
Yeah. So where did that come from?
I don't know. It's kind of a marriage of all of it, melting pot.
Yeah.
You know.
Were you taking some of the things of like Chet Atkins, some of the harmonized things, and then making a little funkier?
Probably so.
Okay.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
But Bobby Womack really influenced me more than anyone I can think of.
Yeah.
And he'll say the same thing about me because he quit. He had a handmade guitar up in New York that he used to bring down and play.
Okay.
And he bought a Telecaster like mine. I'm thinking, man, why are you playing a Telecaster? You know.
Yeah.
And but that's the style he went to. And
So he started playing a Telecaster because of you?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
So that's an interesting question. So how did the Telecaster kind of become the Memphis guitar? Because it seemed like that was used. It wasn't obviously the only. It wasn't the only guitar that you had. But
no.
but that seemed to have kind of become the Memphis style of guitar playing is kind of played on a Telecaster.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Cropper played
Right.
on one,
Yeah.
but we all played Telecasters.
Yeah, and even the Muscle Shoals guys, Jimmy Johnson and some of the other guys
Absolutely.
were playing Telecasters
Yeah.
also. Was it just the utilitarian aspect of the instrument?
Could
or-
have been. It could have
Yeah.
been.
You know,
Easy to travel with, too.
Yeah, don't have to worry about it getting crushed.
No, not at all.
So at American, it seemed like you were recording with some R&B acts and you know obviously different white and black artists, but
Yeah.
then it seemed like that kind of stopped, and I was wondering if you could if this was a factor, how much of an effect did the assassination of Martin Luther King have on Memphis?
A lot. Because we were all friends. Everybody got along. And it seems like after the assassination, they were a little standoffish. We didn't, I think we had Aretha booked, and she canceled.
Wow.
And Bobby Emmons, the organ player, I remember him saying, well, we didn't do that, and it's not my fault. And but it was different. The whole attitude of that changed.
Because before that, in Memphis, obviously Memphis in general there was a lot of racial division, but it seemed like that the musicians were pretty integrated.
Oh, they got it. Yeah, absolutely.
But then this, even though you had been somewhat integrated, when the assassination of Dr. King, it seemed like that was that relationship was really hurt.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. I really hated to see that go that way, but I didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
A tune called I'm in Love, and I remember the intro Womack played. And my part was I'll probably play his one too.